Applied Linguistics Group uploaded this video for BS English students. Dr. Khalid Malik, the founder, has a PhD in Applied Linguistics TESOL. Having more than 25 research papers, he taught at many foreign universities and in a postdoctoral study program. Join Applied Linguistics Group at youtube.com/@1966 Pakistani or use a QR code to join our Facebook group at
Translation, genre, and register. Genre represents a form of social interaction between writers, translators, and readers, target text receivers, as readers, when exposed to a text belonging to a particular genre, anticipate a specific textual structure. A genre is a particular type of literature, painting, music, film, or other art form which people consider as a class because it has special characteristics. Genre is a term used to classify types of spoken or written discourse. These are normally classified by content, language, purpose and form. Example. Learners analyze an example of a formal letter of complaint, looking at structure, set phrases, formality and purpose. The terms register and genre both refer to types of text or text classes and aim at capturing variation in style, in the most general meaning of the term. They are both motivated by the situation-conditioned organization of linguistic features that are used intentionally in a text to fulfill some communicative functions or goals. Linguistics and translation studies. The discipline of linguistics has developed in several different directions, but always with the aim and ambition that the study of language is a science. Linguistics has contributed to translation studies in 4 fields: syntax, semantics, pragmatics, and text linguistics or discourse analysis. Syntax and semantics contribute to the awareness that each language is full of gaps and shifts when compared with another language. Fawcett 1997:19. Accordingly, Catford, 1965 and 1980:49, states that the source text and target text items rarely have the same meaning in a linguistic sense, but they can function in the same situation. Pragmatics is concerned with the use of language and how language functions in context. Theoretical concepts in the field of pragmatics have been introduced into translation studies in the form of speech act theory, cooperative principles, and relevance theory. Text linguistics. In the 70s, the study of linguistic beyond the sentence starts to gain momentum when the study of text became current among a group of German linguists working at Münster, Cologne, and Bielefeld, Bullomoller 1989:9. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, many linguists felt that traditional morphological and syntactic tools were not adequate to explain texts. New discourse tools needed to be developed. The resulting new field has been given a variety of names: text linguistics, discourse analysis, and discourse linguistics. These terms are used almost interchangeably in the literature. 23 nonetheless, in this study, text linguistics is used interchangeably with discourse analysis. The distinction between text and discourse is not always clear-cut. In many cases, discourse and text are 2 terms which are used in free variation. Discourse analysis can be said to date back to Harris. According to Harris, language does not occur in stray words or sentences, but in connected discourse. Harris 1952:3. Brown and Ewell S. Discourse Analysis, 1983, uses discourse in a narrow sense, referring only to conversation studies. Michael Stubbs, in his book Discourse Analysis, 1983, applies the term discourse to both conversational exchanges and written texts with an attempt to study larger linguistic units such as the sentence. Hatim sees text analysis as essentially concerned with the organization and mapping of texts, whereas discourse analysis emphasizes on social relationships and interaction through texts. 2004:262. In fact, text linguistics is often spoken of synonymously with text analysis and written analysis, an analysis of texts that goes beyond the sentence level. However, a different distinction is sometimes made between discourse analysis as the study of spoken interaction and text linguistics as the study of written interaction. Some linguists maintain a distinction between text as a discourse without context and discourse as a text and its situational context. For instance, Verdonk, 2002:18, defines discourse as the process of activation of a text by relating it to a context of use. In other words, a text does not come into being until it is actively employed in a context of use. The contextualization of a written text is actually the reader's reconstruction of the writer's intended message, that is, the writer's communicative act or discourse, Ibid. 18. As such, according to Verdonk, a text can be defined as the observable 24 product of the writer's or speaker's discourse, which in turn must be seen as the process that has created it, Ibid. 18. In short, a reader who reads and tries to understand the meaning of a text is in fact engaged in a process of reconstruction. In the process, she will search for signals that may help to reconstruct the writer's discourse. Inference of discourse meaning is in reality a matter of negotiation between the reader and the writer in a contextualized social interaction. Hatim and Mason 1990, Hatim 2001, Verndonk 2002. Verndonk goes on to suggest that a text can be realized by any piece of language as long as it is found to record a meaningful discourse when it is related to a suitable context of use. In present-day literature, the term text linguistics or discourse analysis refers to practically any analysis of text, as long as the primary interest is in relationships beyond the sentence. As pointed out by Selsa-Mercier and Alstheer, 2006:4, formal definitions typically characterize discourse as a unit of coherent language consisting of more than one sentence. However, the notion of sentence is not always relevant. The meaningfulness of a text or discourse does not depend on its linguistic size. A piece of text or discourse in context can consist of as little as one word. Shouted in a hostile corridor, the single word fire will function as a complete text. A public notice like danger is a small-scale but complete text because it fulfills the basic requirement of forming a meaningful whole in its own right. Halliday and Hassan 2001, Hatim and Mason 1990, Baker 1992. It is a meaningful whole from the perspective of looking at text as a communicative occurrence because people who hear the word fire will immediately catch the meaning of the word as an act of informing that a fire has broken out. In short, people who see the word danger will interpret it as a warning. We recognize a piece of language as a text because of its location in a particular context. Verdonk 2002:17. For instance, the road sign ramp ahead will be interpreted by 25 motorists as a warning that there will be a small hump on the road ahead and it is therefore wise to slow down when you drive over it. Ibid. 17. Provided that we are familiar with the text in the context, we know what the intended message is. In other words, the intended meaning of a text depends on its use in an appropriate context. Text linguistics and translation studies. According to Li Yunxing, 2003:61, text linguistics and discourse analysis have provided the most comprehensive theoretical model for translation studies that may serve as research tools not only in the linguistic dimensions concerning cohesion, coherence, and thematic structure, but also in the contextual dimension including genre, register and cultural constraints in text production. Li Yunxing, Ibid. 61, further suggests that the communication-oriented framework of text linguistics will become the leading donor discipline for the linguistic school of translation studies in the new century. Ibid. 6. Mason, 2004:29, states that the term communicative and functional broadly represent a view which refuses to divorce the act of translating from its context, insisting upon the real-world situational factors which are prime determinants of meaning and interpretation of meaning. Among others, the functionalist views of the British tradition in linguistics, stemming from Malinowski, J.R. Firth, and continuing in the work of J. Catford, Michael Gregory and Michael Halliday have provided translation studies with an alternative view which approach language as a text. Malinowski, 1923, invokes the notion of context to account for the way language is used among the Trobriand Islanders in the Western Pacific. In such non-literate communities, he observed that language functions as a mode of action, but it could 26 only function in that manner if what is said is made meaningful by being linked to a particular context of situation familiar to the participants concerned. He goes on to suggest that this also applies to a modern civilized language. Malinowski introduced the term utterance to refer to the contextually dependent statement which has no meaning except in the context of situation. In other words, language cannot be seen in isolation from its social context, and that the meaning of an utterance is found essentially in the use to which it is put. In order to understand the meaning of an utterance, it is necessary to have some knowledge of the total cultural background and the cultural history of the participant, and the practices they are engaging in. Apparently, Leibov's description of the domain of discourse analysis closely corresponds to what Malinowski has said about context. Commands and refusals are actions, declaratives, interrogatives, imperatives are linguistic categories, things that are said, rather than things that are done. The rules we need will show how things are done with words and how one interprets these utterances as actions, in other words, relating what is done to what is said and what is said to what is done. This area of linguistics can be called discourse analysis, but it is not well known or developed. Linguistic theory is not yet rich enough to write such rules, for one must take into account such sociological non-linguistic categories as roles, rights, and obligations. Leibov 1969, 54-55, another linguist, J. R. Firth, a colleague of Malinowski, has built on Malinowski's notion of context of situation. He sees meaning in terms of function in context and rejects those approaches to the study of language which seek to exclude the study of meaning. He takes up the notion of context of situation and turns it into a key concept in his linguistic theory by incorporating language into it. This is how he formulates it. My view was, and still is, that context of situation is best used as a suitable schematic construct to apply to language events, and that it 27 is a group of related categories at a different level from grammatical categories, but rather of the same abstract nature. A context of situation for linguistic work brings into relation the following categories: A. The relevant features of participants, persons, personalities, I. The verbal action of the participants. 2. The nonverbal action of the participants. B. The relevant object. C. The effect of the verbal action. Contexts of situation and types of language function can then be grouped and classified. Firth 1957, 182, Firth, 1957, maintains that the study of meaning in linguistics should be viewed in terms of function in context. Firth is interested in language that appears in a text and the study of texts in relation to their situation. Context of situation now includes participants in speech events, the action taking place, other relevant features of the situation, and the effects of verbal actions. These variables are amenable to linguistic analysis and are therefore useful in making statements about meaning. In short, context of situation is to be interpreted as an abstract representation of the environment in terms of certain general categories relevant to the text. Working within the parameters set by Firthian linguistics, Halliday defines language in terms of the basic distinction between context of culture and context of situation. A constant feature of Hallidayan linguistics is the claim that the relationship between text and context is a systematic one. Gregory, 1967, in defining situation and context, has described it as follows. By situation is meant the study of those extratextual features, linguistic and non-linguistic, which have high potential relevance to statements of meanings about the text of language events. By context is understood the correlations of formally described 28 linguistic features, grouping of such features within texts and abstracted from them, with those situational features themselves constantly recurrent and relevant to the understanding of language events. Emphasis original, Gregory, 1967:177-8, Halliday, McIntosh and Stevens 1964:139, has also made it clear that he is not interested simply in language for itself, but in what linguistic theory can offer to the applied study of texts. Within the context of culture, language is envisaged by Halliday, 1973:48, as a form of behavior potential, an open-ended set of options in behavior that are available to the individual. On the other hand, Halliday sees context of situation, Ibid. 71, as the environment of any particular selection that is made from the total set of options accounted for in the context of culture. Context of culture defines the potential, context of situation accounts for the actual. As Halliday, 1973, puts it, can do is not a linguistic notion, and for it to be related to a can say, an intermediary concept has to be brought in can mean. Meaning potential is seen as a set of options available to the speaker and hearer, Halliday 1973. 2.4 Register analysis and translation studies. The notion of register proposes a very intimate relationship of text to context, so intimate that it is asserted that one can only be interpreted by reference to the other. Martin 1989:7. This term is first used in the sense of text variety, by the linguist Thomas Bertram Reed, 1956. Reed's initial use of this term was brought into general currency in the 1960s by a group of linguists who wanted to distinguish between variations in language according to the user, which is defined by variables such as social background, geography, sex and age, and variations according to use, in the sense that 29 each speaker has a range of varieties and chooses between them at different times. Halliday et.al. 1964:77. The use-related framework for the description of language variation aims to uncover the general principles which govern the variation in situation types, so that we can begin to understand what situational factors determine what linguistic features. Halliday, 1978:32. The user variety can be represented in Figure 2.4, language variation user register, etc. Dialects, etc. 1. Field of discourse 1. Geographical 2. Mode of discourse 2. Temporal 3. Tenor of discourse 3. Social 4. Non-standard 5. Idiolectal, source, Hattim and Mason 1990:46, Figure 2.4, use-related variation following the functional semantic tradition pursued by Firth and Halliday. The concept of register is seen by Gregory and Carroll, 1978:64, as a useful abstraction linking variations of language to variations of social context. According to Halliday, 1978, 125, register is determined by three categories: field, tenor and mode. Originally, Halliday, McIntosh and Strevens, 1964. See also Halliday 1978:125, proposed that the three general concepts of a field, mode, and tenor correlate with variation in language form with variation in contexts of the situation. Field is taken to refer to a type of social action, tenor as a role relationship and mode as a symbolic organization, Ibid. 35. In proposing that the situation types are analyzed according to values of the field, tenor, and mode variables, Halliday attempts to show how the context of situation 30 influences the selection of meanings for the construction of a text. His hypothesis is that these three situational variables, field, tenor, and mode, are related respectively to the ideational, interpersonal and textual components of the semantic system, 1978:125. Ideational, interpersonal and textual are three major text functions. The ideational macrofunction conveys ideas, the interpersonal expresses relationship between author, text and reader, and the textual expresses discoursal meaning, which ensures that propositional content and the utterances connect with each other to constitute a linguistically linked text. The relationship between field, tenor, and mode and the particular linguistic features found are as follows. Halliday 1978:64, I. The field tends to determine the transitivity patterns, the types of process. For instance, relational clauses, possessive and circumstantial, and the content aspect of vocabulary. The field is expressed through the ideational component of the semantic system. 2. The tenor involves choice of person, speech functions such as request, permission, imperative and modality. The tenor is expressed through the interpersonal function in semantics. 3. The mode tends to determine the forms of cohesion, the patterns of voice and theme, the forms of deixis and the lexical continuity. All these are expressed through the textual function in the semantics. Each of the three situational variables, field, tenor, and mode may be thought of as a variable that functions as a point of entry to any situation. Halliday calls each set of option a CC, contextual configuration. In Halliday and Hassan's definition, a CC is a specific set of values that realizes field, tenor and mode. In short, it can be said that these three elements, namely field, tenor, and mode, make it possible for the 31 writer or speaker to orient himself in the context of situation. BBC World Service 2009, 4. Expanding the notion of register variation. The Register S approach to text analysis has not gone unchallenged, however. To equate a given register with a given situation can lead to overgeneralizations to grouping of so-called special languages, such as the language of journalism, the language of advertising, the language of politics, and thus overlooks the multifunctional nature of texts. Hatim and Mason 1990, 5. This issue will be discussed in detail in section 3.3 in the following chapter. For as far back as the early 1960s, Halliday and his colleagues, 1964-94, have asserted that a speaker speaks in many registers. As such, there will be shifts of register within texts. According to Hatim and Mason, 1990, the fluctuation of different registers within the same text is of crucial importance to the translator. Therefore, Hatim and Mason, 1990:51, insist that a successful translation will seek to reflect the different domains of use in a text. In fact, the category of situation type is only a helpful classificatory device. In actual analysis, correspondence between situation and language remains vague. Nonetheless, both linguists agree that the concept of register is a fairly adequate device for predicting language use in restricted domains such as diplomatic protocol and weather forecasts. Ibid. 51. The relationship of a given register to its situation is expressed by Gregory and Carroll, 1978:68, in the following terms: the more typical or stereotype the situation, the more restricted will be the range of options from which choices in the field, mode, and tenor can be made. If the register restriction is viewed as a continuum, at one end is the maximally restricted registers such as diplomatic protocol, and at the other end, an open-ended 32 registers such as the language of journalism. Registers such as insurance contracts can be located in between. As such, Hatim and Mason conclude that the concept of register is a fairly adequate device for predicting language use in restricted domains. It becomes less powerful in unrestricted areas. 1990:54.
Applied Linguistics Group uploaded this video for BS English students. Dr. Khalid Malik, the founder, has a PhD in Applied Linguistics TESOL. Having more than 25 research papers, he taught at many foreign universities and in a postdoctoral study program abroad. Join Applied Linguistics Group at youtube.com/@1966Pakistani or use a QR code to join our Facebook group at